Just to give a brief overview, today's webinar is aimed at developers who want to understand how to build applications for both desktop and mobile environments using the same common tool sets and frameworks. So I'm just going to be covering some of the basics here, that I'll be producing a sample application that works for a mobile and desktop environment. And by the end of this hour, you should have a good understanding of where Sencha fits in and how to use Sencha Complete, and in particular our visual application designer Sencha Architect, and our two core JavaScript frameworks, Ext JS and Sencha Touch. So Sencha Complete itself is a bundle of products to allow you to build desktop and mobile applications, and it consists of a number of frameworks, which are Ext JS for producing desktop web applications, Sencha Touch for mobile web apps, and also a Sencha Touch chart add-on for charting on mobile. On the tool side, we have Sencha Architect, and this is our desktop and mobile application builder, and our Sencha Eclipse plugin, and a Sencha mobile packager for packaging up your applications for deployment as a native app to mobiles. So the bits we're going to be focusing on today will be the core frameworks, Ext JS and Sencha Touch, and also the tool Sencha Architect. So in terms of where Sencha fits in, our core frameworks, Sencha Touch and Ext JS. Sencha Touch is targeted for mobile and tablet devices, and Ext JS for the desktop side. And as long as you're able to render your data out into a common format, such as JSON or XML, you're able to plug into any number of different server-side technologies. So there's no particular dependence on a web server, application server, or database server. So there are many benefits of opting for a single platform. Some of these include vastly decreased development time because you're dealing with common terminologies between the frameworks. And also the core code base is reusable across mobile and desktop applications. And because you're developing in a web language, it allows you to develop and debug using common web tools. And another advantage of creating web applications using our frameworks is they're future-proofed against platform evolution and migration. So for instance, web applications that were designed many years ago should still function fine in today's modern web browsers, albeit with just a few minor quirks. So to give you a brief overview of our frameworks, Ext JS is a JavaScript framework for producing rich web apps in multiple web browsers. So you code in JavaScript. It features a robust object system, an MVC model for best practice coding, and a whole suite of comprehensive UI components that allow you to produce complex layouts. And there's a whole host of robust data APIs for integrating with the server side. On the mobile and tablet side, we have Sencha Touch, which is our mobile HTML5 framework. And this is a high-performance mobile HTML5 framework for building cross-platform apps. And it features a complete set of appealing and ready-to-use mobile UI components. So it allows you to build apps that run on Android, Apple iOS, and BlackBerry. And you may have seen this week we made an announcement that we'll also be supporting Windows Phone 8 soon. So you'll also be able to target that particular platform. And for mobile web applications built on Sencha Touch, you can also create native versions of these apps for iOS and Android from both Windows and Mac machines. So there's no longer a particular reliance to have a Mac machine to create a native app for iOS. So what we've seen with Sencha Touch is hundreds of apps already deployed, either via just basic web apps or submitted to app stores. On the tool side, we've got Sencha Architect, which is our visual application builder for desktop. Yeah. So the Sencha Eclipse plugin is another tool within our Sencha Complete bundle, and this is a add-on for Eclipse which helps reduce code and errors and increase productivity. And it features full code completion for Ext JS and will be soon supporting the Sencha Touch framework within the Eclipse plugin. And one of the benefits of the Eclipse plugin is it can ease and simplify version migrations because there are type libraries for each framework version, and this offers assistance when migrating between versions. So as I mentioned, the Sencha mobile packager allows you to build native Touch 2, and you can also access native APIs from within a Sencha Touch 2 app, such as the camera or in-app purchases. So what we're going to be doing in today's webinar is create a simple data-connected mobile and desktop app. And this app will be a list of customers and will be rendered on a mobile device and desktop web browser using the Sencha Touch and Ext JS frameworks. And we'll be adding some functionality within this to allow the user to save, delete records. So I'm going to switch over to my virtual machine now where I've got the environment installed. So up on screen here is Sencha Architect, and I've just gone ahead and created a new blank Sencha Touch mobile project. So Architect itself, on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a full list of components in the toolbox, and these can be dragged and dropped onto the canvas or the project inspector. And then in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, we've got the config panel, and this allows configuration options to be specified on the selected components within your project. So first of all, we're going to look at where we're going to get this data source from. So in this particular example today, we're using a .NET 4.5 Web API backend. So up on screen now, I've got Visual Studio. And within this project, all I've added to it is a database, a model for retrieving the data from that database, and then a Web API controller for retrieving that data and rendering it to the front-end browser. So if we switch over to the database, we'll have a quick look to see the type of data we'll be dealing with. So within the database, we've got one table called customers, and this has our data set in it that we're going to be dealing with. And we've got 5 columns: the ID, the company name, notes, the latitude and longitude, so the location of that particular customer. We've then got the data model, which retrieves the data for us very easily from the backend database. And then Visual Studio has created an automatic Web API controller to retrieve that data and render it to the front-end browser. And this controller contains a number of methods, including a getCustomers method, which renders all of the customer data, or there's a method for returning an individual customer record. And we've also got further methods for putting, posting, and deleting customer records. So this is going to be our RESTful service for saving and deleting data. And if I switch over to the browser here, in the URL, if we just navigate to our web application and do /API/customer, that request automatically gets routed across to my customer controller here, and it fires off the getCustomers method to return all of the records. And you can see that's returned in the browser. So what we're going to do now is switch over to Sencha Architect, and we'll start to build up our application. And the first thing we need to do with an architect is tell Architect what type of data we're going to be dealing with. So for that, we're going to be adding a model, and a model defines the type of entity we're dealing with. So we're going to call this my customer model. And we can add a number of fields to this. So we're going to add the ID, the company, the notes field, as well as the latitude and longitude. And by default, all field types within here will be type string, which isn't necessarily the right type for all of the fields within this model. So we can select a particular field and we can change the ID to type int, the latitude to float, and also the longitude to float. And within the model as well, we can define basic data validation. So I'll drag and drop a presence validation into my model. And in here, we can define which particular field we want to validate. So in this instance, we're going to validate the company field to ensure that it's present whenever we're saving a record. The next thing I'll do for the model is define a proxy. And because we're using a RESTful service, we're going to choose the REST proxy. And all we need to do on here is specify the URL of this particular proxy. So if I go back to my web browser, all I need to do is just copy the URL from the browser, and we'll paste that into the URL property within Architect. So that's our data definition set up, but we now need to have somewhere for the data to be stored on the client side. And for that, we need to add a store to our project. And the store acts as a client-side array of records, and this can deserialize your data from different data sources such as XML or JSON. But for this particular example, we're going to be requesting the data in JSON format, so I've added a JSON store to my project. So on here, we're going to set the autoload property to true because we want the store to automatically populate and load the data as soon as my project loads up. The next thing I'll do is set the user class name to customers, along with the store ID. And the last thing we need to do within the store is tell it what type of data it's dealing with. So we need to set the model property. Then finally, on the Ajax proxy within this particular store, we're going to scroll down and copy in the URL again for my web service. And this is just for the GET request to retrieve the complete list of records. Any further requests, such as save or delete requests, will go through the RESTful proxy down here. So that's our model and our store defined, so we can now start to build up the application user interface. So what I'll do is drag and drop a navigation view into my project. And the navigation view allows additional views to be pushed to it, and it automatically handles things such as transitions between views and automatically adds back buttons. So on the navigation view, I'm going to set the user class name to main view and set the user alias to main view. And this is just a shorthand reference for if we want to create a new instance of this component later on. And to this navigation view, we're going to add a list component. And it's this list that's going to show our data on the actual application. So within this, we're going to set the title property to customers to visit. And we need to tell the list where it's getting the data from. So we're going to set the store to customers. And one of the properties within the list is the item template, and this defines the formatting for each item that's shown within the list. This is just basic HTML, so all I'm going to do is include a field name within parentheses, and the value from my store will be inserted in this place within the list. So if I return to the design view, I'm going to right-click on the customer's store and select the Load Data option. And you can see the data has been loaded up into my list, and you can see a preview on the screen. And this doesn't look great at the moment because there's quite a lot of records. They're not in any particular order within the list. So what we're going to do is enable grouping and sorting to sort the data and group it alphabetically. So if we select the store, what we can do is add a sorter to the store. On the store itself, we can define the property that's going to be sorted by, so we'll insert the company field. And the next thing we're going to do is add a grouper to my store as well. So the grouper will control how the data is grouped within my store. And for this, we're going to add a simple group function. And you can see that shows up within the project inspector. So by double-clicking on that, we can just populate this with some basic code. And what we're going to do here is return the record and return a particular field name. So company. And we're going to return the first letter from that field. So we're going to group by the first letter within each record. So back onto the list, one further thing we're going to do is add an index bar. And this is going to let us navigate down to the list very quickly. And this is especially helpful for large lists of data. So that's our list set up. So now we can start to build up the rest of the application interface. And the first thing we'll do is add a form to my project, because what we want to be able to do is allow the user to select a customer within the list, and it will show the details within a form and will allow the user to save and delete that particular record. So we'll drag a form panel to the root of my project, and we're going to set the user class name to customer detail. And we'll set the user alias to customer detail, all in lowercase. And to the form, we're going to add a field set. And by default, the field set contains two fields, which is ideal because we just want to show the company name and the notes fields. And we can double click on the canvas to update the labels that are displayed. So the first field will be my company field, and the second field will be my notes field. And we can transform the text field here to a multi-line text area. You may also notice as well that the company label here has been cut off due to the default width of the label here. So one way we can get around that is to set some defaults on the container, on the field set. So on the defaults, all we need to do is specify an object and set the property we want to cascade down. So we're going to set a default label width on any child items of 90. And if we switch back to the design view, you'll see that that's increased the width to allow the label to show up correctly. We're going to add two hidden fields to my form as well. And these two hidden fields will store the latitude and longitude values. And one of the benefits of Sencha Touch is the ability to load a record instance into the form. And to do that, what we need to do is set the name properties on all of the fields. So on this one, we're going to set the name property to company. And this one will set to notes. And that one will set to latitude. And the final one will be my longitude field. So the next thing I'm going to do is drag and drop a button within my form. And this is going to be my View on Maps button. Because what we want to allow the user to do when they're out in the field is load up their application, view a customer record, and click on this button to see where exactly their customer is located. And if we click on the cog icon here, we can see there is a UI style drop-down, and this allows us to set the style of the button. So there are a whole host of pre-built UI styles, and for this one we're just going to choose the forward UI style, and you can see that adds a nice arrow onto the side of that button. The next thing we'll do is add a container into the form, because we're going to add two further buttons within my form, which will be my save and delete buttons. So I'm going to drag and drop two further buttons inside this container. And on the container itself, what we're going to do is set the layout property to HBox. And what that will do is position the buttons horizontally across the screen. So if I just double click again, I can set the text within the buttons. And this doesn't look great at the moment because they're not any particular width, and it'd be nice to have them fill the available space on screen. So one thing we can do on the buttons is set the flex property, and the flex is a ratio value. So if we set both buttons to have a flex ratio of 1, they'll both have an equal ratio, so will fit the available space on screen. The next thing we'll do is set the UI style on the buttons. So for the save button, we'll set to confirm, which makes it a nice green color. And then the delete button we'll set to decline. And then one final thing on the container, we'll set a margin value just to increase the padding between these sets of buttons and the View on Maps button. And we could, of course, move these styles out into an external style sheet, because within Sencha Architect, you're able to link in external resources such as CSS files and JS resources, and any CSS will automatically update the canvas here. But for this particular example, we're just going to hard code our styles within Architect. So we've now got two views within my project, the main navigation view, the form to load the data, and the last view we'll add will be a map view to allow the user to view the customer's details, so view the customer's location on a map. So I've dragged and dropped a Google Maps object into my project, and you can see down here this is automatically linked in the Google Maps API reference. So there's no additional work to be done by the developer, all of that's done for you. So on the map itself, we're going to set the user class name to customer map, along with the user alias. And that is all of our views defined. So the next thing to do will be to add a controller to my project, and this will bring all of the functionality together. So by clicking on the plus button in the top right corner, we'll select the controller option, and we're going to enter a name of customer because that describes the type of functionality that this controller is going to be for. And within the controller, we need to add a number of controller references, and controller references allow us to get references to our UI controls. So the first reference I'm going to add here will be for my main view. So I just enter a name, a display name for this reference, and then a selector for how I'm going to get a reference to it. So earlier on, I entered a user alias on my main view. So I'm going to use the dot prefix and then just enter the user alias. So it's going to get a reference to my UI control based on its type. I need to add another 2 controller references. The first one will be for my customer list. And the selector I'm going to use here will be my main view, and I'm going to get reference to the list within that main view. And then my last controller reference will be my customer detail form. And for that, I'm using the user alias of dot customer detail. Sorry. So customer detail, and then enter the user alias. And what this does internally within the controller is it creates a getter method. So for my main view controller reference here, this will create a get main view method within any functions I have within my controller. So it's a nice, simple way to get a reference to any UI controls. So if I select my controller again, I can now add some controller actions, and it's these controller actions that will contain my custom code to bring all of this application together. So when you add a controller action, you need to choose the type of control this is going to be targeted towards. So the first component I'm going to select will be my list component, and it will be for the item tap event. And you can see that that shows up within the project inspector. And the particular control I'm going to target will be my main view and the list within that view. We'll then add an additional controller action for the View on Map button. So we'll choose the ext.button and select the tap event. And the control query here, I'm going to use a control query of action equals view map. And what this relates to, if I scroll down to my customer detail form and my view on map button, what I can do in here is add a custom attribute called view map. And this will be used in my controller action for determining which controller action fires when this tap event is called. So we'll do that for the save and delete buttons as well. And then we'll go back up to my controller action, and we'll add another controller action, this time for the save button. So the control query here, we're going to use action equals save. And the function name, we're going to customize. And we're going to set that to on save tap. And then we need to do the same for the delete button. So in the control query, we'll do action equals delete. And we'll set the function name to make it a bit more meaningful. And then finally, the last controller action we'll add will be for the ext.map component. So what will happen is whenever the user changes the center position on the map, we want to be able to update the 2 hidden fields within my form. And then when the user clicks save, all of that data will be submitted back to the server. So for the control query on here, we're just going to set it to the customer map alias. So that's my controller all set up. So all I need to do now is populate this with my code. So the first bit of code we're going to add in here will be for the list item tap event. And I'm just going to copy and paste some code I created earlier. And what this code does, the first thing in here is it creates a new instance of my customer detail form. And it passes in a config object. And in here, we're passing in the title, which will be automatically populated onto the top toolbar. And the title we're going to be set into the record.data.company. So the record object itself is being passed in as part of this function call. So if you look at the top here, Architect shows you the particular parameters that are being passed in. So you can see that you're getting a reference to the data view, the index of the selected item, as well as the record object. We also apply the record onto the form, and what that will do is populate the form values within the customer detail form. What we do after that is get a reference to the main view, so the navigation view, and we call the built-in push method, and we pass in our form control. And what that will do is animate across to my customer detail form, and it will have a back button onto the top toolbar for me to easily navigate back to the list of customers. And then finally at the bottom here, all I do is get the customer list and deselect any selected items, because the item type event here is selecting the item, so we want to deselect it after it's been selected. The next event we're going to be adding code for will be the View on Map button. So I'm going to copy and paste code here. So what I'm doing in this particular function is getting a reference to the current record, and for that I'm getting the customer detail form and calling the built-in getRecord method on the form to get my record object. I then create a new instance of my customer map, passing in the title to show on the top toolbar, as well as a map options config, and this passes in the center. So when the map initializes, it will initialize at the latitude and longitude I specified within the record. We then call this.getMainView.push, and we push the view onto the navigation view, which animates across to it. So then we need to add the code for my Save button. And what this is doing in here is getting reference to the form, getting the values from that form, and this returns an array of values. So this is just using the built-in getValues method of the form. And then we get the record that's currently being edited. This line here, what we're doing is starting a kind of client-side transaction on the record by calling begin edit. We then copy the values from the form and apply that to the record. And we are doing an if statement here to check that the record is valid. And this is where the present validation that we added down here comes into play. Because if the company name is left blank, it won't pass this validation check. So it will come down to here, and it will cancel any changes that are made to that record and show a validation message to the user. On the other hand, if the changes are valid, we call records.endEdit, which commits those changes to the record and the underlying store, and we call records.save. And it's this method here which fires off my request to my .NET Web API controller, and I can specify a success method, and the success will be called on the callback from my web service. And what I'm doing here is getting reference to the main view, the navigation view, and calling the pop method, and that removes the topmost view. So in this case, this will be the customer detail form, and it will return to the list of customers. So we're going to add the code for the delete button, and this is a bit more simpler. All we're doing here is getting a reference to the customer detail form again, the record object, and then we call records.arrays, which fires off my delete request to the server to delete that particular record. And what we do is call the pop method on the navigation view to remove the form. So then if I go onto my send-to-change controller action to add the code for the map send-to-change, what we're doing here again is getting reference to the customer detail form, and we call form.setValues, and we pass in the values that I want to update. So in this case, it will be the latitude and longitude, and I'm getting those values from the map using the center.lat, center.long methods. So that's my whole application finished now. So what I'll do is save my project. And I'm going to save this inside of my .NET application as Customer Touch App. And if I navigate to that within the browser, and we can see here the application has displayed fine. The JavaScript console, what we can do is debug the application to see how the save and delete functionality is working in a sec. So by selecting a record, you can see it animates across to the customer details form, and it's automatically populated the form values. And if I clear the company name and click the save button, you can see that a validation message is shown, so we need to enter some text for this to work correctly. And if I click save, this time it's successful and it's returned to the list of customers. So what I'll do is I'm going to switch over to my network tab within Chrome, because what I want to be able to do is view the request which is being sent off to the server. So if I click the save button again, you can see that a request has been sent off to my .NET Web API controller, and it's passing across the ID of the particular record I'm editing. And you can see that this is a put request, so it's updating an existing record within my database. If I scroll down a bit further, we can see the request payload. So this is the JSON values, and you can see in here the parameters that are being passed back to the service. So if I switch back to Visual Studio and view the customer table again, you can see that the updated title is displayed within the table, so you can see that that's successfully going back to the server. So although I'm demonstrating it in Chrome here, it'd be nice to look at it on an actual device. So what I'm going to do is switch across to the iOS simulator. And what we're going to do is navigate to the application. And Architect itself, when you create a project, it creates a placeholder page called app.html, and it's this page here that's your entry point to your app. So you can see here we've got the list of customers, and I can use the index bar to very quickly go through them. You can see at the moment we've got not much screen space because we've got the address bar at the top here and also the toolbar at the bottom here. So what we can do to improve the user experience is add this to the home screen. So I choose to add this as customers, and you can see this as a shortcut onto the device's home screen. And when I launch the application from that shortcut, it loads up in full screen mode without the Safari navigation bar and the bottom toolbar. So from an end user's perspective, it just looks and feels like a native application. And the fact that you've got the nice smooth scrolling, it might not look so smooth over WebEx, so you just have to believe me when I say it's smooth, but it is a nice experience for the user. And you can see when I switch between the list and the records, the transition is done automatically, as well as the back button. And also when I click on the View on Map button, you can see that loads up the map view, and because I've predefined the latitude and longitude, it's gone to that particular place on the map. So that's an overview of Sencha Touch being used within Architect. But what about desktop environments? What we're going to do now is create a simple cut-down version of this application here, but targeted towards the desktop browser. So I've got a new instance of Sencha Architect open here, and what I've done is already created a new Ext JS project for creating a desktop web application. And I've already added the code for my customer model, as well as the customer's store. So this is the same as the structure that I used within the Touch project, but we're now going to be dealing with UI components specifically designed for the desktop. So the first thing I'm going to be doing within the Ext JS project is add a window. And this is going to be a floating window within the browser. And by default, any windows you add to your project are hidden. So we'll just uncheck the hidden property. And we're going to set the layout to HBox. So again, any child items within this container will be positioned horizontally within this container. On the window itself, we're going to set the user class name to main view, as well as the user alias in lowercase. And then we can set the title by double-clicking on the canvas. And we're going to set that to customers to visit. And within this particular window, we're going to drag and drop a grid panel. And on the grid, we're going to set the border property to false, because we've already got a border on the container window. And we're also going to remove the title from the grid, because we've already got a title on the outer window. So on the grid, we need to set the store, because it needs to know where it's getting this data from. So we'll select the customer's store. And when we right-click on the grid within Architect, there is an auto columns option. And what this does is it interrogates the underlying model to see what fields belong to that store and automatically creates columns based on those fields. So in this particular demo, we're not really interested in the ID columns, so we'll delete that, as well as the latitude and longitude, so we'll remove those as well. And I can resize the company column to make it slightly bigger, but the notes column I want to just expand to fit the remaining space. So what I can do on this particular column is set the flex value to 1, and this will take up the remaining space on the screen. So if I right-click on my store and select the load data option, you can see again that the data has loaded up. And again, what I'm going to do is add a sorter to my store, just to sort the data alphabetically. And on here, we just need to set the property to company so it knows what particular property it's sorting by. So then if I drag and drop a form panel as well to this window, you can see because I've set the HBox layout on the window, it's now positioning the grid and form next to each other on the screen. So on the form, we're going to remove the title. And on here, we're going to add 2 text fields. So the first one will be a simple text field, and the next one will be a text area for my notes field. And we'll set the label properties. And then on the first field, we're going to set the name property, because we're going to apply the records to the form, which will automatically load the record onto the form controls. So on this particular field, we'll set that to notes. And the next thing I'll do is add a toolbar onto the form, and you can see that by default it gets added to the top of the form. And we'll add one button, which will be my Save button. And in this demo, I'm not going to add the delete functionality or the view on map. We're just demonstrating the concept that we can create a similar application in both frameworks using Sencha Architect. So on the Save button, I'm going to add a custom attribute as action save. And I'll then go ahead and create a controller for my functionality. So we'll call this my customer controller. And we'll add a controller reference of customer detail. And the selector I'm using here will be my main view, and I'm going to reference the form component within my main view. I then want to add two controller actions. And the first controller action will be for the grid, because when a user selects a grid item, we want to show the record on the form. So if I scroll down and select the ext.grid.panel, and the event name I'll choose will be the item click event. And we'll select the controller action. And for the control query, we're going to use main view grid, so we're referencing the grid within the main view. And the last controller action I'll add will be for the Save button. And we'll use the click event for that. And the control query will be action equals save, because we added that custom attribute to my Save button. And to make the function a bit more meaningful, we'll set the function name to onSaveClick. And we'll start to populate this code. So for the grid item selection, all I'm going to do here is get a reference to the customer detail form, because it's already rendered on screen as part of the main view. And then I call form.loadRecord, and I pass in my record object. And then the save code will be very similar to before. So we're getting a reference to the customer detail form, the values from the form, the record instance, start the type of client-side transaction, copy the values across to the record, check that it's valid, and if so, we'll end edit and call the save method, which will fire off my put request to the server. On the other hand, if it's not valid, we'll cancel the edit and show a validation message to the user. So we'll save this project as my customer desktop app. And if I navigate to that within the browser, and because we've set the window to be the initial view, this is the one that's showing when we start the project, and because I've specified a sort on my store, it's sorted the data alphabetically. And if I just clear the requests down at the bottom here and just update the data here, perhaps add a few notes, and you can see that a request has been sent off to the server with the encoded values down here. So as you can see, in very little time we've managed to produce two simple but powerful applications, one for mobile and tablet, the other for desktop. And hopefully this has helped illustrate how Sencha Complete can assist in the overall application development process. So I'll switch back to the slide now because I've got a few more resources I can show. So in terms of getting started with what I've shown here, you can actually download a 30-day trial of Sencha Complete from our website. So if you just go to sencha.com/products/complete, you can fill in a form and evaluate these products for 30 days. In terms of learning resources, definitely recommend looking at our online documentation. And this is accessible by going to docs.sencha.com, and this incorporates detailed online documentation incorporating API, inline examples, guides and videos. We also have a Sencha Try website which can be accessed through try.sencha.com, and this is an online resource that enables you to see Sencha framework code and quickly experiment with Ext JS and Sencha Touch examples. So you can select an example, see the code files associated with that, update the codes directly in the browser, and see a preview in the bottom right corner. So this is a very nice way to experiment with Sencha code without having to download anything onto your local machine. We also have a Sencha Market website, which is accessible through market.sencha.com, and this is an online resource for finding and sharing Sencha extensions, such as components, data connectors, themes, and tools. For further help, we have our community-driven forums, which can be accessed through sencha.com/forum. And we have a very large community of members, over 400,000 registered members, I believe. And this allows you to ask questions, offer help to others. There's a powerful search facility to find answers to questions that may have been asked previously. And we have an area of the forums, our premium forums, for paid support subscribers. And the forums themselves are monitored by Sencha staff. This is a good place to ask general questions. So I believe we've got time for some questions now. So I'll bring up my, sorry, Lee.
No problem. I just wanted to thank everybody for attending. We will be posting these, this whole webinar recorded on our website, and we're just, I've been recording everybody's questions from the chat, and I'm going to have Daniel pick a few here, read them out, and give you some answers.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Yeah, so one of the questions I've got is related to Architect. So if I go back to my virtual machine. So the question was, the application I've been demonstrating here or developing here, you can see that at the bottom of the screen there is a drop-down list which currently says iPhone. And all this does is it allows you to preview your application in different screen resolutions. So all that does is just resizes the canvas accordingly. So I can select the iPad, for instance, and you can see how that application would look and feel in that particular screen size. But for this particular demo, I just stuck to iPhone just because it fits nicely in this window. If I launch the same application on an iPad, all it would do is scale up accordingly for that particular device. So what I'll do is go on to one of the other questions. So one of the questions was which Sencha training course is the best match to today's webinar? We actually have training courses for both Sencha Touch and Ext JS. And these incorporate a bit of Architect usage as well. So you'll learn how to develop Ext JS applications and use Architect, and you'll also be able to learn how to use Touch and use a bit of Architect as well. And there's details of our training courses on our website. We offer both open enrollment courses as well as on-site training. So another question is, will this code be available on GitHub? We will be making this code available. I'm not sure where we'll do it, where we'll host it just yet, but we'll be sending out the link as part of an email follow-up after this webinar, I believe. So another question is, how do you define different profiles, such as phone and tablets, within Architect? So within Sencha Touch, there is a concept of profiles, and this allows you to determine which type of device you're currently accessing the app through, and you can tailor the view based on the device. So for instance, if I was accessing this customer app from an iPad, I could perhaps have a list of customers down the left-hand side and have a form down the right-hand side. And obviously that type of view wouldn't fit on an iPhone screen due to the smaller screen size. So I could use these profiles to determine the type of device and show a different view based on that accordingly. So within Architect at the moment, it doesn't support profiles. I believe that's on the roadmap for the future. So I'll just have a look through to see what other questions we've got. Okay, so the question here, sorry.
Go ahead, Daniel. This is going to be the last question because we've got them coming in fast and furious from the chat. I've been recording them, and if we didn't get to your question, I do encourage you to ask it in the forums so that you can get a more in-depth answer.
Okay. Yeah, so the question, the last question we'll answer here. I'll try and answer any follow-up questions separately. So the last question is, isn't it possible to reuse the definitions from the Touch project in my Ext JS application? At the moment, no, because there are still some slight differences between the two frameworks. But I think long-term, what we'll hopefully see with our frameworks is they'll become more close together. So at the moment, we've got two separate frameworks, Touch and Ext JS. But we may see in the future these come together so that we can reuse the same base code, such as the controllers and the models and stores, and then just have separate views which render differently based on the device that's accessing the application.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It's been a great webinar. We are hoping to do another one of these later in the month with a different presenter with similar content. So please stay tuned for that. And thank you again. We will also send a follow-up email with links to the source code and as well links to the recorded presentation. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.